summertime for us is actually not really, it doesn't get any easier or any less. We just kind of change what we do. So, you know, if you guys had a chance to watch the Halaqa, or sorry, the khutbah from yesterday, you'll get a sense of kind of like the things that we occupy ourselves with all the time. If you haven't watched it yet, I really encourage you to do that because it was powerful. Khutbah, I think it was one of the best. I mean, for me personally, like, you know, there was a seriousness about it that kind of helped put everything into perspective. And so, you know, this is kind of what we occupy ourselves with during the summertime, because, you know, we still, like, are kind of wading and swimming in pools of darkness a lot of the time. We actually don't go on vacation. That vacation is not really part of our vocabulary. And I think we would be really bad people on vacation when we wouldn't really quite know what to do with ourselves. We'd probably just like sit somewhere with our computers and our phones and like look back on YouTube and checking out what's happening in the Arab news and all of that. I'm a news junkie and I like kind of can't pull myself away from that. But so, you know, there's so much going on in the world that we also have to be careful because, you know, everyone, if you watch the headlines, if you know what's happening in the world, it's very easy to get depressed and very easy to get sucked into the darkness. And so we have to make a very concerted effort to balance out that darkness with light and escape and, you know, take those moments. And our vacations are usually like movies. You know, we run to the movies regularly. We run to the bookstores. You know, we just, it's something to just kind of get an escape. We watch kind of stupid shows on TV. I love Gordon Ramsay, so, you know, I like seeing people, like him call people idiots when they're cooking. It's kind of very, you know, like, refreshing. So anyway, so these kinds of things. And, you know, and I always have to get, you know, because I'm really into watching sort of the political headlines too, I love getting political satire. So every morning I have to watch either Stephen Colbert or I have to watch Seth Meyers. And this is the only way that I can actually hear the news. It has to be filtered through comedy for me to really be able to kind of tolerate it and deal with it. So comedy is actually a really wonderful thing. And we started also recently, you know, watching comedies, and in particular stand-up comedy. So I discovered, I mean, I always knew Dave Chappelle, but I never actually watched some of his shows. And he is brilliant, and he's so funny. And, you know, I think most people know he's Muslim. But you wouldn't necessarily know that by the kinds of things he talks about. But, you know, it's like you have to appreciate his craft because he is just on point, he's funny, he's just, you know, he's amazing. And you learn things when you're listening to him. You know, we also watched, of course, Hassan Minhaj, who's great. You know, so if you guys haven't seen any of these shows on Netflix, you know, he has a wonderful award-winning show called Homecoming King, which was awesome. And yes, we also watched Rami Youssef, which I know is like sparking a lot of conversations around the world. But I think, you know, I really respect him, and you know, he's drawing attention, even though he talks about a lot of controversial topics. You know, we watched his new Netflix HBO show the other night called Feeling, and that was also, you know, really good. So I would highly recommend that. So so what could be better? I came across. I was really excited to learn that here in Southern California, coming up in a few weeks, is a show featuring Muslim female comedians. I was like, oh, yes, there's like 8 Muslim comics or comedians. I don't know how you refer to comedians in the female version. But you know, there was an advertising going around on Facebook, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it's supposed to take place in Huntington Beach. It's a little bit far. And I was like, oh man, you know, it's on Sunday, July 21st. We actually have like a Usuli event here. We were going to do a brainstorming here around the same time. And I thought, you know, maybe I should talk to everybody and see if we can adjust the time. Maybe we all take like you know, a trip down there because, you know, they're Muslim comics and we should support them. And, you know, this is great. So I was like, okay, thinking about it. And I, you know, invited people on Facebook. But then I was like, okay, no, you know what? I can't wait. I have to know, like, who are these women and what is their comedy like? And I was just excited, you know? So I looked at a list of 8 names, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start looking them up on YouTube. I'm going to watch some of their videos and see what they're about. So the first one, I kind of looked at everybody's picture, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Okay, and there's one woman that's a hijabi. I'm like, okay, I'll start with her. You know, she looks kind of funny. And so she was giving a talk, or she was invited to a club somewhere here in Los Angeles, and she, I think it's a club that is, you know, started for artists and for comedians and for like spoken word art and that kind of thing. And the 2 women who organize it are lesbians, and so I think that she was speaking to a lesbian audience. So I turned it on, and you know, the music starts, and she's kind of like coming in like this and doing her little dance. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I want to read to you the first things that she said. So she's covered, you know, and she's a big woman. So, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just a fact. She's a big woman and she has big bosoms, but she's covered, you know? And so she says, so hey, you know, she's like ambling in. Hey guys, I didn't wear a bra here just for you guys, so I can shake it a little more. Okay, you guys are effing gorgeous people. Look at you guys. You are gonna make me turn bi today. I was like, what? Oh my God. Okay, this is an 8-minute video on YouTube. So I was like, okay, you know, and she like literally is dropping F-bombs and, you know, SHIT bombs and, you know, poop bombs. And you have to know something about me. I'm like, I hate bad language. I hate foul language. And I'm known in our house as like the head of the polite police. I do not let, you know, like my son say even like the word damn. Like when he says damn, I'm like, where are the beavers? I don't see any beavers. Okay? So he knows that this is a joke. So, you know, just to kind of get through this, let's just say, you know, when I say F that, whatever, let's just call it fry that shrimp, okay? Because there was a lot of shrimp being fried that night. So she was like, you know, fry that shrimp, blah, blah, blah. She starts talking, and, you know, I want to just, you know, I don't want to misrepresent, like, what she said. And I wanted to also get your reaction, because I'm like, okay, maybe it's me. So she goes on, and she starts out, and she says, I just want to get something off my chest. First of all, you know, I go over to my mom's house, and every time I go to my mom's house, she brings her friend over, and she pulls out my wedding albums. And, you know, and she's a big woman. She's like, okay, and I have to say that, you know, I'm a Muslim woman, and I'm big, and I blame Cinnabon, because I used to be, you know, different, and Cinnabon turned me into a size 16. She's wearing, you know, a big thing. And then she goes on and she, like, you know, talks about how her mom and her mom's friend sit there and look at the wedding albums and look at her and look at the wedding albums and look at her, and she's like, you know, like, I used to be queen bee, and now they treat me like an Oompa Loompa. And then, you know, it's kind of like a little bit uncomfortable. And then she goes, but I just want to say, I love my body, my husband loves my body, and we should all love our bodies. It's like, okay, fine. Then she goes on, she goes, well, okay, so I'm Muslim, and I just have to say, you know, I check off all the boxes of things I need to do to get to paradise. I pray, I fast, I wear my scarf. And, you know, and then she starts mocking that, and she goes, so, you know, but I have to say, I'm sure all of you all have had the same feeling. 10% of you, even the atheists, probably think, did I choose the right religion? Like, oh my God, okay. Then she goes on and she starts talking about her mom. She goes, you know, my mom is, you know, she has come up with this new way to elevate her holiness with God. And I gotta tell you, this is like the weirdest stuff, and I can't make this frying shrimp stuff up, okay? She washes dead bodies. And let me tell you, like, when did God stop accepting money as, you know, a donation? So, you know, the people in the audience are obviously not Muslim. They're laughing, you know, and she's trying to, like, you know, drop enough F-bombs to get people to laugh, and goes on from there. And I just have to say, you know, so I'm watching this and I'm getting upset. And for me, you know, just to kind of like tell a side story, when the professor and I first came here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get upset because this is like really upsetting for me, and it goes on from here. So when we first arrived here in Los Angeles, you know, we went to the Islamic Center of Southern California. We met Mrs. Alfie, who is like the, you know, she had funded a chair for the professor. Anyway, you know, we were getting to know, I was getting to know the community. This was my first, like, introduction. And I was, you know, at that time, reading a lot of books still. And one of my favorite books was Al-Ghazali's, it was translated, The Remembrance of Death and Dying. And, you know, so this book is kind of like, hey, you know, you have to remember that all of us are going to die. And we have to do what we need to do to prepare for that. Because it's kind of like, if you know a final exam is coming, and you would be very unwise not to prepare for that. And all of us are going to, you know, reach that final exam. Whether it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be, you know, 50 years from now. But we know it's coming, and there's no way to get out of it. So it's a really important thing to sort of remind yourself of this and put your life into perspective. So, kind of interesting stories, like people would be like digging graves and like laying down in them to remind themselves, okay, in the end of times I'm going to be here, whatever. So I kind of thought to myself, I was really wanting to be, like focused on how to develop my relationship with God. So I thought to myself, what, I kind of want, I told Mrs. Alfie, I'm like, what, do you guys do burials here? I actually would really like to wash bodies. And I said that really seriously, because I wanted to remind myself, like, this is where we all end up. And she looked at me with a little bit of horror, and she was like, no, you're young. You don't want to do that. She really, like, pushed me aside from that. So for me, like, this whole idea of washing bodies has, like, a really sacred element to it. So, hearing that was kind of like, oh my God, okay, fine. But so it's like, you're wearing a hijab. You're dropping F-bombs left and right. You are talking about filthy things. Okay, maybe this is just a one-off. I watched the whole thing, turned it off. I'm like, okay, let's work our way down the list. So there are 8 Muslim women. Maybe she was just like, an aberration. So I go to the next one. Again, F-bombs, S-bombs, lots of frying shrimp. We have to talk about sex. We have to talk about vaginas. We have to talk about blowjobs. We have to talk about drinking and drugs and white boyfriends, because most of these people are like brown skin. And, they have to talk about, making fun of their immigrant parents and, talking about shocking images and being proud to drink and not pray and eat pork. And, and it's like, they all begin with I'm Muslim, I'm Muslim, I'm Muslim. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, basically, like, so I could give you more examples, but it's just, it's like very, very upsetting. So, I'm thinking to myself, in what way are you Muslim? It's like they basically, all of them go to a place where they are making fun of Islam, making fun of Muslims, making fun of Muslim men. Oh, you can't go out with Arab men. White men are so much better because you can go crazy and they'll buy you flowers, but with white men, they'll tell you that that's haram. Or that, one woman had like a scarf and she had an injury on her neck. So the first thing is, oh, I know what you're thinking, blowjob. I'm like, oh God, no, I'm not thinking blowjob. And of course the typical stuff about terrorists and, women walking 10 steps behind men and all of this sort of stuff. So the net of it is like, basically Islamophobia is correct, right? Islam has absolutely nothing to offer humanity. And, it's misogynistic, it's backwards, it's foreign, But these women are the ones that are, like, telling us about it and making people laugh for a cheap joke. They basically throw Islam under the bus. So I watched all 8 of them. And I have to say, like, definitely they were at different levels of skill. And the ones that were not as good, you can literally tell within the first few minutes, like, where the person is, how they are. And I have to say, if they were more skilled, I watched more of them. Some of them were so painful, I literally could not watch more than a minute or two, and I skipped through, and I just had to shut it off. The woman who, there were 2 women who I think were the most skilled, because their wit was sharp. They had more complex ideas. It wasn't like the low-hanging fruit of just like the disgusting slurs against Islam. One of them is actually, has her own like podcast. She's half of the team of Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. She's the bad Muslim. And she very proudly says, I'm the bad Muslim. I'm the one who doesn't pray, I eat pork, and I drink. And she does this whole segment, she's Persian, and she like does this whole sort of show about remembering when she was 11 years old and going to, her Muslim, Sunday school class or whatever, and her interactions with her teacher and how her teacher is telling her about how she can earn heaven points and hell points. And, it's like, okay, it's one thing if you talk about these things and you joke about them, and you come back and you, like, redeem Islam, or so it's kind of like, yes, here's your perception, but here's the reality. And there was, here's the possibility, here's the possible misunderstanding that took place here. None of that happened. And so, sadly, the most skilled person is sort of the most advanced in terms of her career. The second one, who was also really good, I mean, who was good, more good, I guess, more articulate, you know, had more complex ideas, again, had to go and talk about private parts, you know, and had to talk about, you know, boyfriends, all with, you know, frying shrimp in the meantime. So I was so upset. It was awesome. It was like Thursday, and I just shut it down, and I was like, okay, I can't handle this. I walked down the hall to check on the professor, and he is waiting in his pools of darkness, you know, preparing for the Friday khutbah, okay? And when I walk into his den, like, his back is to me, and so I'm like, you know, upset. I open the door. He doesn't even look at me. He's like, what's wrong? Okay? This is the benefit of like living with someone that you cannot hide anything from. Like, literally, you can read my aura from like 50 miles away. It's like, okay, what's wrong? Tell me. And I didn't even know that I was like that upset. And I'm just like spewing. I'm just like, you know, emitting just like, I don't know what. I'm sure my aura was like bright red or something, you know? So I'm like, it took me a second. I'm like, why am I so upset? I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know. And normally I try to keep my upsets to myself because he's got enough dark pools, and you know. But I couldn't contain myself. I'm like, I cannot believe. You would not believe. I'm watching these Muslim female comedians, and I just like let it all out. I just vomited it all over the professor. And then I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad because, you know, he didn't need another pool of vomit to deal with. So I go and I'm like, okay, I have to pray. I just have to pray. So I go and to the living room. And I put my head down and I pray, and you guys, I cried. I cried so hard. And I can't even, you know, it's just like, I don't know where it came from. It just like, I just poured out of me. And part of it is because, you know, I get so upset, like, I chose this faith. I chose this faith, and every morning I wake up, every day. You know, we just jump in these pools. It's okay. We jump in these pools of darkness trying to figure out how do we bring light. You know, and it's a choice, and it's an honorable, I love being Muslim. I'm so proud to be Muslim because I know what's in this tradition. And these women inherited it and didn't even bother, and they like just throw it under the bus for a cheap laugh. And I just, you know, like all 8 of them. They were chosen. Sorry?
They were chosen.
I don't know how they came together. I have no idea how this particular group of people came together. Okay, I can say, I've talked about the fitna page on Facebook before. That's where I found it. Okay, so I'm sorry. I have a lot of run-ins with the fitna people. They create fitna in me. So, but anyway, anyway, okay. So I was like, all right, let me just calm down and let me just try and think about this. Because, you know, okay, they are children of immigrants. I'm a child of immigrants, so I totally get it. I know what it feels like to grow up. You're embarrassed about your parents, you're embarrassed about your culture, you know, your parents don't speak your language, they don't know the challenges you're dealing with, you know, it's like very uncomfortable, you know. And for so many of my years, until I became interested in Islam, I hated being Chinese. I hated being Chinese, and you know, my mom was the same way too. And I'll just tell you a funny story. I was like remembering this morning. You know, I was younger than Nito. I was probably like 7 or 8 or something. And my parents, you know, I mean, typical, I'm sure you have these experiences too. People come from overseas, and it's like, why do they have to stay at our house? You know, and it's like so irritating. And, you know, so anyway, this is a separate story. So my parents were in imports and exports, you know, as part of their like transition, you know, and assimilation into America. And so there was a guy that they were dealing with and doing business. And so, you know, I'm young, I don't know what's going on, but all I know is his name is Captain Ye, okay? I mean, that's literally his name, and it's funny because I'm in my 50s and I still remember this to this day. So for some reason, Captain Ye really wanted to talk to my mom. My dad was out of town, he's the normal contact, but my mom like didn't want to deal with him, and she told me, okay, you know, Captain Ye, I really don't want to talk to him. So Captain Ye came and rang our doorbell. And I was like, okay, just pretend that we're not here, okay? And he's gonna go away. So I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting quietly in the living room, and we're like waiting for him to go away. And the doorbell rings, and the doorbell rings, and the doorbell rings. And then pretty soon we hear like our side gate, like opening, you know, like from the front to go to the backyard. And he has let himself into the backyard to come look in our windows because he's convinced that we're home. My mom's like, okay, hide under the living room table. So I'm like, oh my God. So I hid under the living room table, and my mom hid behind the sofa. And we like waited there until he left, and he looked through every single window. Okay, this is my association with dealing with Chinese people, okay? So I didn't want any part of that. And so, you know, I went to Berkeley, which is like, you know, tons of Asian people. I like just avoided Asian people like the plague. And then, you know, I had my own experiences with racism, but I didn't, you know, I'm sort of embarrassed to say this, like my experiences with racism weren't challenging like African Americans, you know, who get shot, or, you know, Muslims who get killed. I had the thing where people looked at me and they were like, oh, she's a pretty Asian woman, you know, and it was like creepy white men that would come up to me with whatever perceptions they had of pretty Asian women and try to like make conversation with me. And I would find that extremely irritating, again, because it's like, okay, you know nothing about me, you're like a stranger, and you just want to talk to me because you like the way I look. So it just kind of reinforced this idea of like, okay, I don't like that. So it wasn't, ironically, until I started becoming interested in Islam and reading about equality and people and just learning the beautiful traditions that I thought, you know what, I'm being racist and I'm being unfair, and I should like try and see, you know, Chinese people maybe aren't that bad. So I remember this was before I became Muslim, but I had already started reading about Islam, and I had not met the professor, obviously. And so through some family friends, I met, you know, a whole group of like Taiwanese young people. They were in my age, and they were doing, you know, they were the same thing as I was. They were working in jobs and trying to get ahead, and I was like, okay, great. So I went out with my friend, and we met all these Taiwanese people. They all look like me, so I feel comfortable, you know. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm home, you know. And they were really nice, and then they started talking about, you know, jobs and whatever. Then they start talking about, well, what kind of food do we eat? What does your mom cook for you? And then you roll into the complaints about, you know, oh, your parents are so this, and your relatives are so that, and I'm like, oh my God, I am back in my relative's house, and I'm just listening to people, you know, it's just the kids of the people that I tried to avoid, and I'm like, okay, I'm not really interested in gossiping about Taiwanese families. So I'm like, okay, I'm interested in talking about things like the meaning of life, God, what happens to you after you die. Okay, let me try and introduce this into the conversation. So I did that. I'm like, oh, you know, what do you think the meaning of life is when you think after you die? Nobody cares. Nobody, they're looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I'm like, okay, this is not home for me. This is why I am searching. So, but it took Islam to break me out of this, you know, immigrant child mindset. And it would be something if I would be like, I become a stand-up comedian and I just like throw the whole, you know, Chinese population under the bus, but it's not the same because we're talking about religion. We're not talking about an ethnicity. And that's what I felt with these women, is that a lot of them hated themselves. They hated their parents and they hated themselves. And they took it out through their comedy against Islam because they conflated culture and they conflated religion. And then they, you know, reduced themselves to the typical things that they felt their audience would you know, be affected by. And this is a problem because, you know, when you go to a comedy club, right, you're in a good mood, you're open, you're ready to laugh, you know, you're happy. And many of these people probably have never met Muslims before. This is an opportunity, you know, and it's like this is an opportunity to say something beautiful, but they had nothing beautiful to offer because they had nothing beautiful inside them in terms of their own understanding of this religion. So I calmed down a little bit and I thought, okay, I understand, but I still completely don't agree with this. Many of them know the situation for Muslims now. They know people who are persecuted because they even say it in their own monologues. They say, yeah, it's a hard time being Muslim. Yeah, Muslim, blah, blah, blah. So they know. And they know that when they put themselves out in front of an audience, you, whether you like it or not, you are representing your faith, especially when you start by saying, I'm Muslim, okay? In what way are you Muslim? Don't say you're Muslim. Say you're Pakistani. Say you're Persian. Say you're Egyptian. Say you're wherever you came from, because that is your ethnicity. And I am fine. I can laugh at jokes about Pakistani parents. I can laugh at jokes about Chinese parents. I can laugh, you know, at jokes about whatever, but do not conflate Islam with whatever ethnicity you come from. But I don't, you know, I don't know if maybe they haven't even thought of that because they haven't even taken the time to recognize that there is a difference between ethnicity and religion. But
when you take an opportunity like that, you know, art, comedy, this is a tool. This is a powerful tool in our day and age. Yesterday, the professor was talking in the khutbah about how we live in a time where everyone speaks and no one listens. And it's hard to break through. But comedy is one of those things that does break through. And it requires intelligence, articulation, it requires hard work. And it, you know, like, I think of people like Ellen DeGeneres, who I love. She's a comedian. She's not Muslim, obviously. Ellen DeGeneres, you know, she has one of the most popular comedic shows on TV, but she started out as a stand-up comic. And, you know, to date myself and her, I actually saw her in person in high school when she was still starting out as a stand-up comic. And she was brilliant, and she still is. But she never reduces herself to bad language. She never reduces herself to, you know, cheap jokes about sexuality or about touching body parts or blowjobs or any of those kinds of things. And she made it. You know, that was back in a time when there were even fewer women in comedy. And I know women struggle with comedy. You know, I know that it's a male-dominated industry, and I know that there's a lot you have to do to fit in. But you know what? If you are full of confidence and beauty and light, you can go into that and shine your light instead of going there as an empty vessel and sucking in all the disgusting stuff that's already there and trying to fit in. And I know because I came to Islam because I was running away from all of that filth. The talk about the sex, the talk about the body parts, the blowjobs, the whatever. You know, this is what attracted me to Islam. And I would be really remiss to say that there aren't female Muslim comedians that are doing a good job, that don't, you know, throw Islam under the bus. One of them is Noor El-Hadid, and you can look these people up online. You can look up this show online. You can find the names online of the people I'm talking about. You can go watch the videos yourself. You know, I don't mean, and I know maybe if someone from Fitna is watching me, it's like they think that I have a thing about Fitna. But, you know, the truth is the truth, people. It's like, you know, you can watch and judge for yourself. And from my vantage point, where I believe with my whole heart that Islam is beautiful and has something beautiful to offer people, that you can do much better. And you start by learning what is in this faith. I also have been watching podcasts, just to give you another example from the realm of artistry, because I do consider like comedy as, you know, within that realm. There's a really great podcast, I'm hoping that actually they'll interview the professor, called Diffused Congruence. Okay, there are not many Muslim podcasts out there that I think are worth listening to. And I've been searching because I'm trying to figure out who's out there, who's it worth listening to. And these guys have been around for a long time, and they've interviewed a lot of really interesting people. But so recently, I think just like last week, they had put out a podcast where they interviewed Amir Suleiman, who is a famous poet, a Muslim poet. And I had never been really, I mean, I'd heard of him because Sharif is really into like spoken word and hip hop and all of that kind of stuff, but I didn't really know anything about it. And this is why it's actually also these podcasts are really valuable, because they interview a lot of like Muslim people who you might not have really known their backstory or anything. And as you learn from what they've experienced, it's actually really, it's wonderful. So Amir Suleiman, and I really encourage you to listen to this, was talking about like, you know, poetry as an art form and just, you know, like the history of it. It's just really fascinating. But at the very end, he shared some of his spoken word poetry that he's working on. He's working on several different projects, and he merged some of the things. And it completely blew me away. I've never heard anything like this. It's like uplifting, it's cool, it's like spiritual, it's like soul moving. It's like, whoa, you listen to this and you're like, holy cow, I need to know more. And it's beautiful, it's divine. And so I was like, okay, here's an example. I know Mona Haidar, I believe, is very popular, and she's done a lot of very empowering music. I know it's controversial. I don't know a lot of it, to be fair, to be honest, but I know she's done a lot of good things, and I know that she works on things like abuse and, you know, empowerment, so it's not like throwing Islam under the bus. And of course, Baraka Blue, which we heard when, you know, we went to an event, and Baraka Blue, who's also a convert and a poet, was reading a lot of his poetry about the Prophet. And I heard him interviewed also on the same podcast on Diffused Congruence. And he himself has his own podcast called Path and Present. where he talks about like the spiritual path and that kind of thing. But his work was mind-blowing and beautiful. So I take as excuses that, you know, Muslim female comedians have no excuse. I'm sorry. You know, your Islam, as you're conveying through your craft, is not the same Islam that I follow and that I believe. My Islam is about beauty and justice and love and humanity. Your Islam is about ugliness, backwardness, misogyny, you know, everything that Islamophobes would love people to believe about Islam. And these women could make a lot of money. You know, they could end up on their payroll and, you know, but I just, you know, I don't know that anyone has, you know, I don't know that anyone has, you know, like, seen this or reacted to this in the same way, but I just felt I needed to share this with you because it was so upsetting and it's such a huge opportunity. Honestly, it made me feel like I want to go write, like, a comedic monologue just to prove you can do it. So maybe I'll do that for next time.
Yeah, do it.
But anyway, and also, you know, Ahmed, who's not here today, he's visiting his family. I know you're watching. I told him I want to write material for you too. But because, you know, it's like these are the things that, you know, we have to embrace the tools of our age. We have to be smart about how do we break through, how do we share something beautiful, you know, and like I said, like the two women, Noor al-Hadid and Yasmin al-Hadi, sorry I didn't say her name before, she was a former student of the professors at the law school, and she's doing comedy now, and you can find her, you know, on YouTube as well. You know, she doesn't do that, she's great, you know, so anyway, we have a long way to go, but, you know, and I wasn't trying to throw these women under the bus. They obviously, you know, have talent and you know, they have the bravery to get up and do that, but they need to feed their souls, they need to feed their intellects with beautiful Islam, which is very different from their ethnicity. So, that's it. Thank you. That's Nita playing video games, sorry. Yeah. Okay, we can break and pray. I'll start and come back and start. That's a good idea. Okay, so let's do that. Okay. So I just wanted to say a couple of things because in the break, there was a question and I actually forgot to say this. I picked on Muslim women today and I didn't pick on Muslim men. So I just wanted to say that, you know, everything that I said applies to both men and women, you know, comedians, obviously. And just to kind of put a finer point on it, you know, I mentioned that I really like Dave Chappelle, but Dave Chappelle actually doesn't identify as Muslim, occurred to me. So he is not out there representing himself as a Muslim. I mean, people know it and it's talked about, but, you know, so someone was asking, well, how do you feel about him and kind of all the bad words he uses and all the stuff that he does? And I think that he himself recognizes that that's really problematic for a Muslim audience, but he doesn't present himself that way. But, you know, the point I also want to just say is, you know, it's fine if you want to make fun of something that Muslims do. We all know that Muslims do things that are crazy and ridiculous and funny if you put them in their perspective. But I think what's really important is to leave them with something else so that what you say can either mention that this is, you know, perhaps a misunderstanding, perhaps there's another way to, you know, look at this situation, that Islam is not, you know, something that's ugly, but you know, there's so much more to this picture. I mean, you just have to have something to balance that. And, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm going to embarrass you. We have someone here who actually wrote for the Rami show. And so, you know, I was like, oh, great. You know, but it doesn't change what I say. It doesn't change how I feel about it. But I'm actually really happy because, you know, I understand, you know, we cannot also be effective with these tools if we are not honest and if we don't talk about the issues that are confronting our youth. So we do have to talk about sex, we do have to talk about drugs, we do have to talk about dating, and all of these things that Muslim youth in particular are struggling with. But I believe they're looking for, you know, Islam. I mean, we know here that Islam has a lot of stuff to say about that, and stuff that's not just on the extreme and, you know, draconian, and it's like either you're this or you're not Muslim. I think that there's a lot of, you know, we try to at least talk about here, there's a lot of nuance, a lot of richness, sophistication, you know, a lot of room for discussion. And I think that's really important that Muslims, you know, especially young Muslims, need to understand that Islam has something to offer them that's relevant to the challenges that they face now in this time that can actually be very uplifting for them, and especially, you know, people who are really interested in social justice. You know, the professor has been talking recently in khutbahs about how Islam, more than any other religion, is built on a foundation of justice, and without justice, everything falls apart. And that's something to be very proud of. If you're a Muslim, you know, a youth that is fighting for social causes, and you don't know that actually your religion, more than any other, demands justice. And that's actually really cool. So, and I think that that's an opportunity to build on, you know, the relevance of Islam in our time. So anyway, again, just to say, I didn't mean to just pick on women. It is men, and maybe, inshallah, you know, if I have a chance, I know there are a lot of really great men, you know, male comedians out there, and I don't know them, I haven't watched them. So, you know, maybe I'll watch and see if I have something to say next time, inshallah. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Inshallah, so today we will talk about Surah Al-Sharh or Nashrah, Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. I usually before the Halaqa, I mean before the Tafsir, I like to make a comment about something in our public life. Yesterday, Nader Hashmi sent us this article from Reuters. The article is very short, but basically the gist of it is that Saudi Arabia, Russia, and 30 other states have written to the United Nations supporting China's policies in the Western region. According to a copy of a letter seen by Reuters on Friday, in contrast to strong Western criticism. So basically this has to do with Uyghur Muslims in China and the concentration camps, which in some reports hold up to 2 million Muslims in China. And there, to be very clear about this, a lot of people have not read up on what is happening to Muslims in China. There are 3 good books, good academic, scholarly books about organ trade, and which is a huge problem in the world of human trafficking. The top 3 countries in organ trade in the world, first is China, second is India, and third is Egypt. And we, in the case, we're not talking about people, partly we're talking about poor people selling their organs, quote unquote, voluntarily, if you consider poverty to give you a choice. But in human trafficking, and especially in the world of organ trade, we are talking about the farming of human organs, meaning obtaining human organs through coercion and killing often the victim in the process. And the 3 books that I'm talking about that document human trafficking, especially in organs from China, it involves primarily the Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. So meaning that part of what they do to these Muslims in concentration camps is that they execute people and farm out their organs. On top of that, there are numerous human rights reports written by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and even the Human Rights Council, which has special reporters who reported on the concentration camps in China, basically documenting a pattern in which this Muslim population in China attends forcible indoctrination camps where they are, quote, taught communism and de-Islamized. Now, of course, the Chinese government always claims that, well, we're fighting terrorism, which is now what every authoritarian government in the world claims to do, is that it's fighting terrorism. You know, basically you label your opponent terrorists. Even Salman al-Auda in Saudi Arabia is labeled terrorist for just speech. Nearly, you know, so many people are punished and tortured and killed under the label of being terrorists or terrorist supporters, and their crime is speech. In the case of the Chinese Muslims, their crime is that they're Muslim. So, and there's also a BBC documentary. I was not able to, I watched a small part of it, and then it's extremely painful that you can watch that documents what happens to these Chinese Muslims in China. So now you have 35 countries, which, by the way, included a large number of Muslim countries. The countries listed in the letter, in the article, are North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, Belarus, Myanmar, Burma. The Burma that is responsible for the genocide against Muslims and the Rohingyas, the Philippines, which is also responsible for the in mass human rights abuses against Muslims. The Philippines, you don't hear about in the news anymore, but under the label of terrorism, they have forcibly converted many Muslims out of Islam to Christianity, as well as systematic massacring and extinction of the Muslim population. Syria, which, as I said in the khutbah, is responsible, the Syrian government responsible for 1,200,000 people arrested and tortured, and 14,000 people murdered under torture. And that's just the documented, leave alone the millions of people that die and continue to die. Pakistan, Oman, unfortunately Kuwait and Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, as well as most African countries. Now, this, we are watchers. In Christian theology, watchers are angels. Angels that are supposed to have a function of watching human beings and keeping track of satanic activity, and especially when the Antichrist is born, etc., etc. But I'm telling you, in Islamic theology, we are watchers. That's who you are. You are a watcher. That's a function you're playing. You are watching. Watching, i.e., remembering, comprehending, understanding, and documenting. And sadly, in the modern age, technology has made us more ethically liable. In the pre-modern age, you could live on your farm, receive very little information, and so as a watcher, you're only responsible for a very limited amount of data. In the modern age, it's the curse of technology that we are now all watching an enormous amount of data that is also burdening us with an enormous amount of ethical responsibility. So, when 35 countries, and I'll tell you immediately, in the world of international human rights, the way human rights function, a human rights violator or a group of people that include human rights violators like Burma, which is responsible again for a genocide, like Syria, which is responsible for a genocide, does not happen unless there is a concerted lobbying effort. In the case of this momentum, the concerted lobbying effort was led by on behalf of the Muslim world, which China wanted the Muslim countries to basically say, It's okay to murder 2 million Muslims. It's okay to forcibly convert 2 million Muslims. It's okay to have a concentration camps and to commit a Holocaust. A Holocaust. Who did they turn to lead the Muslim world? To produce this shameful, disgusting letter? Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And why did the Muslim countries sign on? Money. Money. Even Syria looked towards Gulfi, particularly Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. Qatar and Kuwait saw this as an opportunity to carry favor with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates at a time where they're boycotted and so on. And they all do an enormous amount of trade, of course, mostly importing, but also they rely on Chinese technology and anyway. But we know some Chinese Muslims, and we know some of them who've told us lost their parents, lost their family. The stories are unbelievable. Grace's his friends was, as a watcher, I put myself in the position of these families. It's like I put myself in the position of the Syrians who are being bombarded every day. A bomb falls on them and kills their children and their neighbors and their loved ones. As a Muslim, Allah is not expecting me to go carry a gun and change the world, but Allah is expecting me to have an ethical being. As a Muslim, Allah is expecting me to see an article like this and then fall in sujood and shed tears and pray to Allah that I would not be held responsible for this calamity. At a minimum, that is what Allah expects of me. Put yourself in the shoes of the Chinese families who look and see the entire Muslim world has abandoned them. They told the entire Muslim world, have told them you're expendable. Now, as an ethical Muslim, as a watcher, knowing this, what if I am approached by one of these governments? What if I am approached by Syria, by Kuwait, by Qatar, by the United Arab Emirates, by Saudi, by any of the Muslim countries that have become complicit in the Holocaust against my fellow Muslims in China? Leave alone if they were not even Muslim, my position would be the same. If they were Jews, if they were Christian. But if these governments come to me and say, we want you to be on our fatwa council, or we want to give you an honorary ministerial position, or we want you to be our honorary legal advisor, and we'll pay you for it. This is ethical responsibility. And it costs. God knows it costs. The cost is very high because money draws you friends, earns you a lot of friends. People love you when you have money. And when you take a position against power, money runs away and people run away. That's the position of a watcher. You have to be aware of this. If nothing more, to tell your friends, your neighbors, your family. My message to these Muslim countries is shame on you. You will be held to answer in the final day. Khasmakumullah. Your judge is going to be Allah. There are 2 million Muslims, human rights organizations who are largely comprised of non-Muslims have documented huge track records of violations that rise to the level of a genocide, if not a Holocaust. Can you imagine if this was Israel instead of Saudi Arabia? Would Israel allow Jews to be exterminated like that anywhere in the world and sit idle by? Can you imagine if these were Christians? Would the Trump administration, and Trump administration constantly raises the persecution of Christians in China with China. They don't raise the issue of the persecution of Muslims. They did raise it a couple of times. The concentration camps. There are no concentration camps for Christians in China, although there is persecution. But there are concentration camps for Muslims. China is on a deliberate policy of ridding itself of its Muslim population that is centuries old, with an enormously beautiful tradition. Just do a little search on Islam in China, and you will read such a remarkably rich historical and cultural tradition full of beauty. And this is all done in the name of terrorism. This, subhanAllah, does tie into our surah today. And like our surah is, by the agreement of all scholars, as Meccan, it was revealed in the Mecca period, there are reports that it followed Surah Al-Duha, that it was revealed right after Surah Al-Duha, which, if you look in your Quran is the surah right before it. Now, there are a class of surahs, or an ayat, that were addressed to the Prophet ﷺ as a prophet. So the audience of these ayat and these surah were the Prophet ﷺ dealing with his own psychology and his own spirit. These surahs and these ayat always raise the question of whether they are applicable beyond the Prophet. So in other words, if Allah is speaking to the Prophet as, or and the same for instance with the ayat of Moses, where Allah is speaking to Moses, or Allah is speaking to Jesus. And then the issue that theologians always dealt with is, well, do we consider for all practical purposes this ayah or this surah to be abrogated, mansukhat al-ma'na, that the meaning of this surah is abrogated after the death of the Prophet, or does it continue to apply beyond the death of the Prophet? And this surah, أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ, the clear majority, meaning that it is only a minority that consider that to be to consider the meaning abrogated. If anyway, there's no point in going into the names of scholars and all that, but that its import, its moral lesson, although addressed to the Prophet ﷺ, applies beyond. And so it has something to say to all of us, although the initial audience was the Prophet ﷺ. What is, again, and we've dealt with this before, like a lot of the Meccan surahs, the purpose of the surah itself is to construct the ethical being, to construct your ethical consciousness, to create, to mold and craft that consciousness. Once that consciousness is molded, that moral, ethical consciousness is constructed, that beautified consciousness is constructed, what it does is the world will be a reflection of that construction, which interestingly, I mean, it taps into something that Grace was saying. In Arabic we say, فَقَدْ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِي. If you are empty, if you are vacuous, you can't reflect something beyond that emptiness. If your soul is not beautified, if your soul lacks beauty, well, you're not going to reflect anything other than ugliness. If your soul is angry, what you exude into the world is anger. It's like when Grace was talking about vomiting all over me. She opened the door, immediately the aura was an aura of vomit. It was literally, she just, and then she closed the door and left. I sort of heard what she was saying. I was nodding my head throughout. I know it had to do with comedians. I got that much. But then she wanted me to watch one of them, and I said, no, I have enough ugliness to throw at something. Anyway. What is inside of you, you will reflect beyond. One of the most key things is that if the inside of you is a despairing soul, is a broken soul, that is what you will exude. And as we will talk about, if that soul is not just injured, an injured soul, but if that soul is not just injured, but the injury is accompanied with arrogance, what it often exudes is vindictiveness and aggressiveness. It is that equation you will find in the Quranic treatment throughout, in so many surahs. It is Allah alerting us. Don't think, when Allah talks often about hypocrisy and defect, it is something that we all engage in that we attempt to cover and decorate, sort of put makeup on whatever is inside in an attempt to conceal, obfuscate, cover up, represent to people other what is inside of us. But the Quran consistently insists that what is inside of you will come out. And that will be what you do with people. And that is, and that theme of despair in Surah Al-Sharh is a very powerful theme. As a Muslim, if you have a despairing soul, you will have an illness, and that illness will affect the construction of iman or piety and faith within you. Now, why is despair such a problem? Despair is a defect in your relationship with your Creator. You don't trust your Creator. And we'll come to that. So when we say inna ilallahi raghibun, but anyway, we'll come to that. About Surah Al-Sharh, there is a poem that it's an Arabic poem, and I don't want to mention, I spent a lot of time translating it, but I'm just going to say it in Arabic and then summarize it in English. فلا تيأس إذا أعصرت يوما فقد أيسرت في الزمن الطويل ولا تظنن بربك ظن سوء فإن الله أولى بالجميل فإن العسر يتبعه يسرا وقول الله أصدق كل قيل. The poem basically says, don't despair, and remember in the moments of desperation that if you looked at your entire life, you will find that the moments in which Allah bestowed favor upon you far exceed the moments in which Allah tries you. You're given health, you're given family, you're given education, you're given every moment that you live. You drown in Allah's bounties. But we very quickly become angry when we're tested. We very quickly become judgmental and even aggressive in our relationship with our Maker when Allah takes away, denies us some of that. So the poem reminds you of the ayah in Surah Al-Sharh and says, remember this surah, because if you truly believe Allah's word, then you will internalize the message of the surah. Okay, so what is the... Amanda, can you read through it?
Yes.
Just read through the whole thing.
In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Did we not relieve your heart for you and remove the burden that weighed so heavily on your back and raise your reputation high? So truly, where there is hardship, there is also ease. Truly, where there is hardship, there is also ease. So when you are free, work on and direct your requests to your Lord.
Okay, so أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ. What was the first verse?
Did we not relieve your heart for you?
Yeah, good translation. أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ. Now, Quranic Muslims reflected on this first ayah, this first verse. The interesting thing to say about it is the idea of inshirah al-sadr, the idea of the expansion, or majazan, metaphorically, I guess. Majazan, or metaphorically, that your heart expands as a sign of ease or happiness. Now, there is, in the Arabic language, before Islam and after Islam, diq al-sadr, the constriction of the chest, is always taken to mean concern, worry, sadness, depression. Inshirah al-sadr, the expansion of the chest, or sense of relief in the chest, is always taken to mean tranquility, happiness, faith, energy. Now, interestingly, we do in our own experience, life has taught me that there are always, if you talk about human experience, refer to yourself, because you never know what other people. But when I feel tranquility, I feel it in the chest. And when I feel concern and worry, it's as if your chest caves in on you. And as Allah says in the Quran, that your heart becomes constricted as if you are being raised in the high skies. In other words, you're being denied oxygen. The higher you go in the sky, the less oxygen there is. That theme of Iman being equal to an expanded tranquil heart or chest is a consistent theme in the Quran. So for instance, when Allah says أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ, that who Allah helps come to Islam, it's as if their heart is rendered tranquil. Some of the best things I've read commentary about this idea is how about someone who says they're a Muslim, says they're a mu'min, a faithful, but their chest is full of rancor, anger, envy. I am sure in your life, if you're not one of them, you know some of them. There are plenty of people who claim that they have a good relationship with Allah, but their chest is constantly churning. This is not what Iman is supposed to bring you. If you have such a heart, and no one but you and Allah knows whether that's true or not, and if you don't know, reflect on it. Iman should translate most of the time is in state of tranquility with Allah. If it doesn't, then you need work to do. Then you have work to do, as we're going to talk about. Growing up, my mother, Allah yarhamha, Allah bless her soul, was allergic to, in Egypt, and I don't think it's solely an Egyptian thing, obviously, but in Egypt we have a type of,
Seeing?
No, it's a sort of it's a common theme of these women who get together, do nothing but talk about what the neighbors did and who bought what and who married who, and illattu al-adlu al-namima and all of that stuff. And my mother was always allergic to our relatives who get together over dinners, and she would register her protest by loudly declaring, the minute they start doing that, loudly declaring that she's going to go pray. Of course, she would go pray and never, she would just stay in prayer. She don't emerge, it doesn't re-emerge. And every time they go check on her in the room, she's praying or doing dua. And it stayed with me that she would always say that the fact that their heart is so full of the affairs of other human beings and where they went and what they did and what they said and who they married and who they're seeing and who they're fighting with and who divorced who and who left who, that means that their hearts is not full of Allah, of God. And I take that very literally. So when Allah reminds the Prophet ﷺ and tells him, "Alam nashrah laka sadrak," a reminder, haven't we? And here in Surah Al-Sharh, it's a time in Mecca when the Prophet is thoroughly persecuted. He is thoroughly burdened. Remember that in Mecca he is beaten to the point that his face bleeds. There are several reports that Surat Al-Sharh came after Khadija died. And he was, if you remember from your history, that the Prophet ﷺ was very close to Khadija. And she played a huge role in supporting him. And if it is true that this surah came after the death of Khadija and is telling him, "Alam nashrah laka sadrak," so at a time that he is persecuted, at the time where he sees his followers being tortured, and even there was a financial boycott that led to mass starvation among Muslims, at a time when his heart is broken because his wife died and his grandfather died, and so on. His uncle died, Ammu died. So theologians would raise the issue of what is this inshirah as-sadr, what is this relief to the heart that Allah is referring to? And Allah is reminding you that it is not the material things in life that is the source of the real tranquility in the heart, represented by inshirah as-sadr, but it is your relationship with the Maker, with Allah, the Iman. So when Allah says, "Alam nashrah laka sadrak," so when they say, with what did Allah give him that tranquility in the heart. What is Allah referring to when He says we've given you ease in your heart? We've given you, expanded your heart. And the answer is with Iman, not with the material things. So yes, you are suffering persecution. Yes, your heart is broken because they're calling you a liar, they're calling you a fraud, they're calling you a magician, they're calling you all these horrible things. Yes, your wife died. Yes, all of that, yes. But the blessing of a tranquil heart, a tranquil soul, is without estimation. There was a man, I've mentioned him in one of my khutbahs. His name was al-Maghrabi. In 2015, he died in prison in Egypt. This man was imprisoned for 32 years. This is the guy that at one point had maggots growing in his flesh because of the way he was treated in Egyptian prisons. His skull was, from beatings, was so deformed. If you look him up on the net and he's not wearing his cap, it's very hard to look at his skull. It just looks horrible. But I'll tell you, he was released in prison after the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, and only for 2 years, and then he was rearrested in 2013 after the coup. So I met this man in 2011, and I thought to myself, I am going to meet, this is a man who's been in prison for 30 years, suffering beatings, whose legs were deformed from the maggots that grew in it. And I thought, I'm going to meet someone who is full of rage. It has to be. Allah is my witness. I met one of the most tranquil and beautiful human beings I've ever met. Not an iota of anger. Someone like that makes you ashamed to be alive. Full of beauty, forgiveness, not an iota of, even if you, I had to keep telling him, okay, can you describe to me your torture? He would say, no point. What's the point, my son? What is my point to my son? In 2015, he died in prison. So he suffered until his death. But immediately, when Surah Al-Sharh is a surah that if you don't have memorized, you have to memorize. And I repeat it often in prayer because it's a surah of consolation. And it reminds you of whatever you're going through. There are examples of people who've gone through much worse and demonstrated the power of faith and the beauty of faith. I don't want to, there are also some of the examples. I was watching a Syrian woman who was raped, sexually violated in Syria, became pregnant, gave birth to a child whose father is unknown because she was raped by a number of soldiers. Her interview made me so ashamed. Sorry. Made me so ashamed of myself. Made me so ashamed of every moment of sadness and depression. What do I have to complain about? If a woman like that can smile and say, Allah is beautiful. I'll tell you what I do in these moments. I fall in sujood. I love sujood. I love sujood. There is no time you are closer to Allah. And I'll tell you another thing. That I cover my head in sujood. Why? Ibn Arabi says that the reason we cover our hair in sujood is symbolic to tell Allah, I have an intellect. And this intellect is a very, 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 very powerful machine. It's a machine capable of mathematics, of logic, of philosophy, but it is also capable of deifying the self and completely negating the maker. It is so powerful that it can philosophize atheism. So when I am doing sujood, I cover my head symbolically to say to Allah, I admit or I concede that I am subjugating this intellect to you. Your love is above my logic. Your love is above my logic. Allah, limit my logic, but give me your love. Drown me in your love. Whatever emptiness is in my heart, fill it with your love. You have not tasted true sweetness in life if you haven't tasted the bliss when Allah taps into your heart and says, I answer your prayer. As we'll talk about, it doesn't mean you live in heaven. It means that you develop a loving, trusting relationship with Allah despite all the trials and tribulations, and you deny your self-suffering to witness the suffering of others. So you say, I no longer will focus on my self-idolatry because I have given up, I have donated myself to you. And now my role is to love you, and by loving you, to love everyone else, and to dedicate myself to removing the suffering of everyone else, not myself. Let myself suffer. Let it suffer. But other people, no. Because of Allah's love. So that is Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. If you read the commentaries, Ibn Arabi writes 5 pages on Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. Tells you, if you understand what Inshirah al-Sadr is, what is the expansion, the ease in the heart, in the chest is, if you commit yourself to fighting that feeling where you feel like, I'm bored, I'm antsy, I'm antsy, I'm antsy. Ibn Arabi tells you, if you commit yourself to fighting that and saying, Allah, remove this antsiness and give me your love, you will transform in the way the Prophet ﷺ was transformed. Okay. أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ. And we removed your burden. Now this again, because our ancestors took the Quran very seriously, they paused long and hard How can Allah say, وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ, we removed your hardship? At the time the Prophet ﷺ was still in Mecca, suffering an enormous amount of persecution, with most Meccans disbelieving him. The removal of hardship, raf' al-wizr, is not by improving your material conditions. Because if the self is ill, you could be the richest human being on the face of the earth. Allah can give you billions of dollars, make you the most powerful human being in the world. But you know what? The antsiness in the chest could turn you into a pedophile. Like, what's his name? Huh?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. And that Emirati, the aide of the Prince of the Emirati, what's his name? George Nader?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's one of the richest human beings, by the way. There's enormous amount of money, an enormous amount of power. But that rancor in the heart, the antsiness in the heart, you try to fill it. You try to fill it. It's like Abu Nawas says, when I take the first sip for the enjoyment, but I take the second sip to fill the anger in the heart. Regardless of how, whether you fill it with games, whether you fill it with drinking, whether you fill it with drugs, whether you fill it with anger, revenge, it is a covetous thing. It will constantly demand. It's like a monster. The more you feed it, the more wild it becomes. And unless you learn to control it, and that's raf' al-wizr, that's the removal of hardship. Often when we read the surah in prayer, because those of us that grew up with the surah, and all those of you who grew up as Muslim would probably have had this experience. You find people reading the surah when they're going through some hardship in life, they read it in prayer with great intensity. It's like, they're going through exams, their mother is sick, they want to marry someone, they're married and they're going through a divorce. Immediately Surat Al-Sharh becomes part of their repertoire in prayer. And immediately they pray it with such intensity. And they say, وَرَفَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ, and they think, Allah, remove my hardship. And what they're thinking is, Allah, remove the material hardship I'm going through. Allah, let me pass the exam. Allah, heal my son or daughter. Allah, let my divorce, let my wife come back, whatever. Ibn Arabi says, Allah receives this with compassion and mercy, but Allah also receives it by, the way to translate is by feeling sorry for you. Because you don't understand that it is not the change of material conditions that is raf' al-wizr. It is the change within your heart, so that hardships themselves don't mean the same thing. And that is why Allah is telling the Prophet, وَرَفَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ, we removed your hardship. وَرَفَعْنَا وَلَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. And how did the number 3 translate?
And weight is so heavily on your back.
Okay, after that, the one right after that.
Number 3 is that weight is so heavily on your back. Number 4 is and raise your reputation high.
Yes, say that again.
Number 4 is and raise your reputation high.
وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. Now, again, the Mufassirun stood before this. If Allah is talking about raising your reputation high, meaning the victory that will come, well, it hasn't come yet. So if Allah is talking to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, and Allah is telling him, وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرًا, can you imagine the Prophet's confusion? He's persecuted in Mecca, he's mostly disbelieved. And Allah is telling him, we removed your hardship and we raised your reputation high. So many mufassirun, many commentators said, well, that's inubu'ah, that's Allah is telling him what will unfold in the future, or Allah is assuring him of what will unfold in the future. You'll find that in about half the commentaries. The other half say Raf al-Dhikr has nothing to do with either victory or reputation. Raf al-Dhikr is Raf al-Dhikr fi al-Mal' al-A'la, that meaning raising that what is translated as raising your reputation. What does dhikr mean?
Remembrance.
Remembrance, right? Remembrance.
Or also
But
when they say something, when they talk about somebody.
When we do dhikr, for instance, right, we are remembering Allah. Allah refers to the Quran itself as a dhikr, right? Islam is referred to as a dhikr min Allah. So, but it also could mean reputation. It also could mean victory. So the interesting is about the most translations translate this as we raised your reputation. Mada, is your translation the same?
Yep.
Same? We raised your reputation. But when Allah is speaking to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca and saying we rafa'na laka dhikrak, is Allah talking about a reputation, or Allah talking about elevation of status in the metaphysical world? So you have the prediction of you will become victorious, but, and that's what half of the commentators insist that it's a nubu'ah. And again, yes, that is the meaning of, but if you are translating this ayah, this verse, would you translate it as we raised your reputation or we elevated your status? I mean, I'm not writing a translation of the Quran, but it's very interesting, right? At a minimum, maybe you should have a footnote and explain that وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ doesn't just necessarily mean, why is this important? Well, if you are worshipping with the surah and you say أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ, you might come to وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ and you can't relate. Your reputation hasn't been raised. You're not Nicki Minaj. You're not famous. You know, you have no hope of becoming Nicki Minaj. It's not that you want to be Nicki Minaj, right? I just thought of her because she's the one who withdrew, right? She's the one who withdrew from Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I respect that. There are a lot of other things I respect about her, but I respect that. You know, kudos to her. Good job. So, if you have a relationship with the surah, you understand that there is an intimate relationship between your status in the heavens and the status of your chest, your heart. The higher your status in the heavens, the more tranquility you feel, and the more peace you feel. The more your chest is full of rancor, anger, envy, the more problematic your status in heaven. And I'm not talking about the comedians, so we're talking about brownie points and counter. No, I'm talking about your relationship with the heavens, your feeling of Allah, your feeling of God. It's, the Sufis would always refer to it as the intoxications of love. And in Sufi poetry, it's always described as an intoxication of love. You don't have to become intoxicated with love to know what I'm talking about. You know the times in your life where you were at greater peace with your Maker. All of us go up and down like a, whatever.
Roller coaster?
Yeah, a heart monitor. You know, we have our moments of peace and tranquility, and we have our moments where we feel distant and remote. There's no shame in that, and that's the nature that we are. But if you work at your nature, if you are actively allowing the Quran to reconstruct your consciousness, you want to grab onto these moments where you felt Allah deeper in your heart and increase the amount of space they have in your life. You don't, you know, aspiring to become a qutb is foolhardy. Aspiring to become one of those people who is in a constant plane of inshirah, of tranquility and ease, you know, aspire for smaller goals first, because that takes a lot of work, and it's a type of work that's very demanding, and but the more you increase the space where you are in good form, in good shape with God. And that is why, I mean, to be quite honest, that's why I didn't want to watch the comedians. I didn't want to feel the rancor. I was in a intoxicated state when you asked me to watch it. And I didn't want to interrupt that intoxication. Why invite the anger? Continue the intoxication, because it is overall healthier for the soul and for the body, by the way. Okay. ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فرق فانصب إلى ربك الذي أنقذ ظهرك. Sorry. In Tafsir, I don't know why it always. Okay. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقذ ظهرك. I forgot الذي أنقذ ظهرك. We jumped ورفعنا. Yeah, I skipped it. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقذ ظهرك. So this is ورفعنا لك وزرك, the removal of your hardship. Oh yeah, it's a good thing that you reminded me of الذي أنقذ ظهرك, because there's something to say about that. So the hardship that has, if you would translate it literally, that has strained your back. But there is something interesting about the ayah الذي أنقذ ظهرك. Literally it translates to that strained your back. Now of course we're not talking about a physical thing that the Prophet ﷺ carried, but the physical hardship. Commentators of the Quran, some, you know, they have, there's a lot of discussion about what, that thing that strained his back was his sense of agony about the fate of his people, because they refused to believe him, and he wanted what was best for them. And there are a lot of, in the Islamic tradition, is full of reports about, and in fact Allah consoles the Prophet about, don't let your heart be torn apart about the fate of people who refuse to believe you. Or is it referring to the physical persecution, the fact that he witnessed loved ones even killed or tortured, like Bilal, or is it referring to all of them? But that's not the interesting thing about this area. What is interesting is the word anqada. There's an expression, I didn't write it, but anyway. The word anqada itself, naqd al-shay, it's undoing. The word originates from naqd al-naqa or naqd al-ba'ir. What that refers to is the old Arabs, when they would put cargo on a camel, and then tie that cargo, the way they knew that whether they are overloading the camel or overloading a horse or a donkey is when they tied these ropes by the type of noise these ropes would make. That was referred to as naqd al-ba'ir, that tie. From that, it went to that, the noise people, when you whine, if you carry something heavy, that noise you make, that same expression then moved on to describe that noise you make when you carry something heavy. Then it became an idiomatic expression. Naqd al-dhahr refer to anything you carry that doesn't involve a rope and doesn't involve necessarily a whine, but anything that is undue hardship. So even in law, we, in Kutub al-Qada or Kutub al-Fatawa, when you say أنقض ظهري أمرهم, their affairs have burdened me to the point that I can no longer bear. In the same way that the camel cargo is an overload and the camel will no longer be able to bear it and the rope will rip, or the camel will die. Or if you put too much weight on a human being, that whine will become a cry. The expression became idiomatic. So that's the most interesting. Every time I recite الذي أنقض ظهره, I always think of that poor camel with the rope. Now I put that image in your mind. You'll never be able to get rid of it every time you recite the surah. Right? Yeah. There is a, okay, so anyway. So let's move on. Inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra. Now this is where the most interesting theological, with hardship there is ease. This became actually a very powerful theme in Islamic theology. Is Allah telling the Prophet ﷺ that after hardship there will come ease? Is this a promise? And can we take that as a promise to all human beings? As some people do take quite literally, that if you suffer hardship and you pray hard enough, you turn to Allah hard enough, Allah will send ease your way. A lot of Muslims grew up with that exact same concept. And I'll tell you also that there is a wave of atheism going around in the Muslim world right now because of all the suffering in Egypt and Syria and Yemen and so on. And when you watch the videos and the writings of many of these atheists will cite, I was a Rab'a, I watched people get murdered, I prayed to Allah, our suffering continued. Or I fought in Syria, my brother was killed and tortured to death, we prayed to Allah for victory, nothing happened. So, it's the same. This is, by the way, also it was a very common theme during the Mongol invasions of Iraq and the sacking of the Khilafah. All types of crazy heretical ideas became rampant, including ideas that the devil is co-equal to God and some other, or the deifying of Ali, or other things. Or ideas taken from Zoroastrianism and the four elements of creation, fire, water, wind, soil, and so on. It's a very good topic. Also, the same thing during the Crusades. The Crusades, each crusade, and remember they're the four main crusades, but they count up to 12 crusades. And each crusade was accompanied by a wave of rapes and a wave of massacres and a wave of atrocities. And they would have the human interest. Ibn Arabi himself, who was living during a time where Andalus was under siege and Muslim Spain was being destroyed and forcibly converted. And Ibn Arabi himself leaves Andalus at one point in his life and then relocates to North Africa and then Egypt and then Mecca and then goes to Syria. Like, of course he didn't invent this, but I'm just referring, because he talks about this notion of people who worship Allah, worship God, with that mindset that I pray, and with the prayer, my hardship should be followed with ease. And then when the ease doesn't come, what do you feel? You feel, as Ibn Arabi puts it, khuzlan. Khuzlan means a letdown. You feel let down. That feeling of letdown is one of the most lethal feelings in your relationship with Allah. We experience it at so many levels. I mean, Syria and Yemen and Egypt are very, we talk about very cruel things: torture, death, murder, so on, rape. But I've even, I used to arbitrate divorces and custody issues and so on. And I'll tell you, going through something traumatic like a divorce either makes you very religious or makes you go nuts in rebelling against your religiosity. And if you sum it up, Ibn Arabi is correct, it's khuzlan, it's a letdown. That feeling of letdown. So, many theologians like Jilani and Ibn Arabi, and even if you read Tafsir al-Razi, he talks about this at length. Al-Razi was not by any figment of the imagination among the mystics or Sufis. So when they talk about inna ma'al usri yusra, it says it is not that ease follows hardship. That's not the promise that Allah is making. I'll read the expression, the Arabic that I copied from, I'm pretty sure it was Ibn Arabi, but I wasn't able to verify it because I wasn't able to find but anyway. الدنيا ممتزجة آلامها بلذتها وسرورها بأحزانها وهمومها وصحتها بسقمها. What this saying is, the idea here is an imtizaj. The idea is the mixing, that at the very time that you are experiencing hardship, at the same time you are also experiencing God's bliss. Hardship mixes with bliss. It is your inner self that is like a radar, and it can notice, it can focus, it can hone in on the hardship, or it can hone in on the bliss. And which of it resonates, exactly like when you have an allergic reaction. We react with events in our life, the good and the bad. So one of the most lethal things is in okay, no, I don't want to get into it. Okay. Or as someone else says, الآلام تمتزج باللذات من حكمته ومن حكمته أن يجعل كل واحد منهما يثمر الأخرى, which is a very beautiful concept, but I have to tell you, it had a huge effect on my life. That إن مع العسر يسرا, it is not only that ease mixes with hardship, it is not only that trials and tribulations mix with blessings, but that pain and happiness are so interlinked that each one of them generates the other. كل منهما يثمر الأخرى. Each one of them is actually the generator of other. The height of wisdom is to actually understand the beauty in pain. And I know that if you read the Conference of the Books, I write a lot about the beauty in pain. The beauty in the education of pain. But that's a status of wisdom that comes to you in a philosophical way. You can reach it by reason and philosophy, or you can reach it by spirituality. If you reach it by spirituality, when you reach it, there's a lot of joy. If you reach it by philosophy, when you reach it, there's a lot of arrogance. You feel very wise and brilliant and smart. I don't know if it makes you any happier. Was Kant happy? Not if you read his biography. Was Aristotle a happy human being? Aristotle understood the relationship between pain and happiness, that the two are so interlinked. But if, there's a lot of myths about Aristotle, but he's not like Socrates. He was not a happy guy. He was not like a jolly guy. If it's true that Socrates, went to his death in a jolly state. Anyway, it's up to you. You can reach it by philosophy or spirituality, the path of happiness or the path of arrogance, whichever you want. Okay. Now, there are among the Salafi tafsirs, what I mean by Salafi tafsirs, the more literal tafsirs, they say, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. They say what it is talking about is عُسْرُ الدُّنْيَا وَيُسْرُ الْآخِرَةِ, that the hardship of life on earth will be followed by the ease of your reward in the hereafter. These are the literalists. So they want a simple, straightforward meaning that doesn't involve reflection and spirituality or philosophy. However, among the rationalists like Al-Razi or even Qadi Abdul Jabbar, who comments about Surat Al-Sharh, not in the Tafsir, his Tafsir is lost, we never found it, but it is in his book on Taklif, what is it called? Al-Mughni. Yeah. In his book Al-Mughni, that bit at least says that the necessity of justice, he comments on it, مِنَّمَا الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, was hardship, there is ease. He says, if there was no hereafter, if there is no God, and there's no accountability, then we live in a fundamentally unjust world. Because, there's no redress. If I hurt you, and I kill you, and I get away with it, well, tough luck. I got away with it. So, Abdul Jabbar says, that world would be so fundamentally flawed that the only moral thing or ethical thing to do would be to kill yourself. Because if you're truly a principled person, an ethical person, and you don't believe in God and you don't believe in the hereafter, then you would refuse to live in such an unjust world. Because you're partaking in an unjust system. So a truly ethical person, and he insists that that's why Socrates went to his death when the state tells him, stop doing what you're doing or we're going to execute you. Socrates says, oh, happily, please execute me. If you read Socrates' dialogue, Socrates says, basically, be my guest, make my day, kill me. And it's interesting because that among the Greek sophists becomes sort of say, well, instead of killing yourself, don't kill yourself, but treat the world with utter disdain and absolute resentment. Basically have a massive chip on your shoulder and say, oh, this world really sucks. There is no justice, because there's no absolute balanced system. What happens, people get killed, people get hurt, children die, animals suffer. That's it. And so the Greek sophists developed a very sophisticated system of disdain that becomes what's the word? Becomes a form of nihilism, in at least in attitude. So while you maintain ethical positions so that you can be as just as possible as an individual, but your attitude towards this world is that this is an unjust, disgusting world, there's no way to fix it, and so I'm going to treat it with utter disdain and treat everyone who embraces it with absolute disdain, according to people like Qadi Abdul Jabbar, that in itself, that disdainful attitude is part of being unjust. And it's a whole philosophical discourse that is really fascinating. The part that I find really is that this surah, look at how much it exploded. I mean, if you're reading the Quran, believing that this is Allah's world, and you're taking it seriously, you sit there and it inspires you to levels of discourse, levels of consciousness, levels of awareness. Muslims could have said, as some did, well, Surah Al-Sharh is basically telling the Prophet, don't feel bad, we're going to help you. Okay, end of story. Let's all go home. The fact that there are layers to peel off is my conviction and my belief. Allah is not going to change the state of Muslims until they fix their relationship with the Quran. My belief, until they take the Quran as seriously as their ancestors did, things, Allah is not going to give that barakah. I'll go even a step further. I don't allow a day to pass without a relationship with the Quran. Any day in my life in which I don't listen to Quran, or I don't read Quran, or reflect on Quran is a wasted day. Try it. Just try it. For anyone who listens to this Halaqa, try it. If you try it and it doesn't yield results, then come talk to me. The Quran is a fountain of blessings, and it is there. And if you tap into it, I even take it quite literally. I even believe that just the physical carrying of the Quran is like carrying a fountain of blessings. Other than my mother, I've actually never said this in public. I don't even know if I even. I don't know if I ever told you this. I never travel or go to school or go anywhere without a copy of the Quran. I always have a small copy of the Quran with me. It's funny when I'm in the airport, when I've been profiled a couple of times and they search me, they always find a little book. It's it has a brown cover. It is not superstition. I believe in the barakah of the Quran. Not even, it's just a blessing. Yeah, okay, it's not that it's going to prevent the plane from crashing, but if I crash, I want to crash with the Quran with me. If I'm going to burn, I want to burn in the company of the Quran. It's not that I believe that it will prevent anyone from coming in well, I sleep in the day, so if anyone wants to kill me while I'm sleeping, it has to be in the day. It's not that I believe that anyone will prevent anyone from coming in the day and killing me, but if I die, I want to die with the Quran close to me. That's why I always carry the Quran with me. It is the blessing of Allah's word. Okay. Now, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. These last two ayahs. إِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. What is the translation again?
The moment you are freed of one task, work on and turn to your Lord with your requests.
Okay, so they chose a meaning and went with it as a translation. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ, if you are, faraght means to become done with something, free of something. فَرَّغَ الشَّيْء means to empty something. فَرِغْتُ مِنَ الشَّيْء means I'm done with something. فَرَغَ الْأَمْرِ means it has become something superficial and shallow. So faragh always refers to either completion or emptiness. It could even refer to empty space. Faragh, عندي faragh, meaning I have some emptiness. I have some space. I have some time, depending on the context. فإذا فرغت فانصب. Okay, so if you're done, or if you have that faragh, fansab. Insab means to stand in attention. Nasab al-shay, you put something straight. So if you say nasabtu al-alam, mean I put up the flag. If you say nasabtu al-lawh, means I've put up a plank of wood. If you say and this is أنصب بهمة, meaning that I am exerting an effort, which is a bit archaic Arabic, but it's okay. So فإذا فرغت فانصب, exert yourself. نصب الشيء is attention with exertion. So فرغت من ما, empty of what? And this is the thing that the commentators talk about. فإذا فرغت فانصب, or in some قراءات فرغت فانصب. So if you are done, dedicate yourself, and not just dedicate yourself, but exert yourself, exhaust yourself. So, because again, they reflected on the Quran seriously. They said, well, wait. So Allah is saying, we've removed your hardship, the hardship that strained your back. We've given you ease with hardship. And then Allah says, so if you're done, exert yourself, tire yourself out, exhaust yourself, which caught their attention. And the literalist said, no, it's much easier than that. What Allah is saying is, there will be ease after hardship, and when that ease comes, so when it says farikhta or farakhta, when the ease is, when the hardship is done, the hardship is removed, insab means then pray. Simple enough, straightforward. These are the literalists, which by the way, in all the short tafsirs of the Quran, like Tafsir al-Jalalain and so on, that will always be the tafsir that you read. Which is, it's not wrong, it's just, but Allah is talking to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca and saying, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. So is the removal here, or the end here, referring to the end of hardship, or the hardship being followed by ease? Yeah, I actually I think that I copied this from Razi. Anyway, I'll introduce you to the discourse, because it's. I mean, I have to share the fascination with you. The faragh here, other than the literalists, but it is not that you will ever be done with hardship. It is not that there will ever come a time. Rather, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ, meaning where if at the time that you understand and comprehend and absorb the wisdom, hikmah, that the umbilical relationship and causation between hardship and ease, so you understand the intimate relationship between hardship and ease, between pain and pleasure. And the faragh here is that you reach a level of tranquility from that understanding. Intensify your prayers to preserve and develop that understanding. So, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ here doesn't refer to the hardship, but فَرَغْتَ أَنْت, that your heart, your soul is no longer burdened by the pain, not because the pain has been removed, but because your comprehension of the pain has changed. like al-Maghribi, who's been imprisoned. The guy was my friend who was tortured. It is that it's not his prison hasn't changed, his suffering hasn't changed, but it is the inside that has transformed. وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب, which is intimately tied, and seek your Lord. But the interesting discourse here, again, the literalist said, وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب, and seek your Lord, and turn to God. And turn to God, why? Basically, say thank you, God. God, you've removed, I was suffering, I prayed, you answered my prayer, you removed the hardship. Now, after you remove the hardship, I turn to you and say, thank you, God. Simple, straightforward. Among the non-literalists, not simple, but in fact, that word, farghab, that expression, they talk about الراغبون ثلاث. The seeker, and the رغب الشيء means to seek something. So there are three kinds. راغب في الله, the seeker for God, for the sake of God. فهو المحب, that is the lover. وراغب فيما عند الله, that seeker doesn't necessarily seek God, but seeks what God has. وهذا العامل في الله. So the first type seeks God because they love God. The amil, and that's the muhib, that's the lover. The amil means the worker, the struggler, exerter. Struggler is not really a word, but one who struggles, one who works. It's not so much that you love God or even understand God to love God, but you want what God has. You want God to give you things on this earth, pass your exams, find you a husband, find you a wife, have children, make your children successful, send you to heaven. It is always your relationship with God is what God can give, whether on this earth or in the hereafter. And that relationship of وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب is not what Surah Al-Sharh is talking about. It's not the amil. And that's why they disagreed with the literalists. They said, you're not talking about merchants and trade. What Allah is teaching the Prophet ﷺ, and what the Prophet ﷺ in turn is teaching us is something much more than that. And that is to love Allah because you know Allah. To love God because you know God. And knowledge of God, like knowledge of everything everything else, cannot be obtained without the investment of time. If you claim that you love your wife or your husband, but you don't spend time with them, you avoid them all the time, you stay out all the time, you don't want to spend time with them, you can't stand them, you're lying. It's a lie. If you love them, you spend time with them. And when you spend time with them, you actually come to know them. And you come to know them for who they are. If you don't spend time, you don't know. Investment of time equals knowledge. Knowledge, in the sake of God, is love. If you don't believe that to know God is to love God, then you're not a lover, you're a amil. Your relationship with God is alien. Because the muhibbeen, the lovers, they know that God is so beautiful that it is impossible to know God without loving God. they think of it as an impossibility, as equal to them. You come to them and tell them 1 + 1 is 3. They say logic can't withstand that. But it's not a presumptive relationship. You don't, say, well, Allah, I've been spending extra 5 minutes in dua after every prayer, and why haven't I loved you yet? You must suck. Astaghfirullah. No, it's you who sucks. You don't know how to invest time, and there is an illness inside of you, whether you want to admit it or not. But that's the nature of our relationship. And the third category, وَالرَّاغِبْ عَنِ اللَّهِ. So they say الراغب في الله, الراغب فيما عند الله, والراغب عن الله, والراغب عن الله, meaning someone that the compass of what they covet, what they seek, has been turned around. لأنه راضي بالدنيا وعازف عن الآخرة. Those who have, their psychology has become such that they've accepted, they've become acquiesced with the idea that there is nothing but this world and nothing beyond this world. And they can't see a world beyond this world. They don't really believe in the unseen, in the ghaib, in the paranormal, in the metaphysical, in the hereafter. Now, is it possible to be من أصحاب الشهادة, that you say أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله, that you say the shahada, right? But you really, in your heart, أنت راغب عن الله وراض بالدنيا وعازف عن الآخرة. Is it possible for you to say the shahada, but your psyche, your consciousness, is really just smack stuck to this world, and you really don't give much weight to anything beyond this world? The hereafter is not a reality to you. The ghaib is not a reality to you. Absolutely possible. Does it mean you're not a Muslim? No. But it means that you are at the very baby steps of your relationship. You still have to believe in the ghaib, and then beyond that become raghibun fillah, that where you develop that relationship of seeking Allah for the sake of Allah. The other thing about the surah that I would be remiss if I don't mention is so many wrote about what they call علاقة الدور, the circular relationship in the surah. It starts out with the status of us, hardship, and ends up with calling you to exert yourself in another form of hardship. Starts out with a hardship that is away from Allah, away from God, and that makes you unhappy, but calls upon you to enter into an exertion in ibadah, in intisab, in dedicating yourself in the path of Allah, also in a relationship which will cause you exertion and hardship, but doesn't involve your misery. In other words, in that relationship, you're not miserable. What they also say about Ilaqat al-Dawr in Surat Al-Sharh is that when Allah says, Inna ma'al usri yusra, with hardship there is ease, that it alerts you to the fact that Allah created in this, our entire creation, in this constant cyclical movement, where the good comes from bad, and the bad comes from good. Pain comes from pleasure, and pleasure comes from pain. Happiness comes from misery, and misery comes from happiness. No nation stays up above forever, and no nation stays down below forever. Classes of people go up and down very much like your own soul. And you go from a state of complete ignorance as a baby, where everything to you is intuitive, to learning so much as you grow old, to then, becoming senile, and again, knowledge becomes intuitive if you live that long. And, and so that there's a lot written about why Surat Al-Sharh, although it came to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca at the height of hardship and misery, persecution, the Prophet ﷺ said that it comforted him and that it brought him so much happiness. And the literalists who say, well, it brought him happiness because it promised him coming victory. He didn't know how, and those who say, no, it had nothing to do with coming victory. It allowed him to see new depths of hikmah, new depths of wisdom and knowledge. Entire Islamic tradition, by the way, is constantly in the same cyclical process between those whose spirit and intellect wants things to be even in the relation in the discourse of the Quran, 1 + 1 = 2, and those who see the Quran as an ocean of waves and meaning, and constantly seek in the wisdom of the Lord layers. That's the nature of human beings. We are not the same, and each has their role, each has their function. There are types of people who will be drawn to the 1 + 1 = 2 people because that's all they can handle. And that's fine. But you must always invite people to aspire for more. Because your Lord is deep, and the love of your Lord is endless. I found that لو كان حملا يحمل لسمع نقيض ظهره أنقض الحمل الناقة إذا سمع له صرير من شدة الحمل. The Arabic jargon that I read is about the word أنقض ظهرك and the tie of the camel. Okay. The last two things. One of the things that caught my attention as I was reviewing my tafsir is that a constant theme, not just about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but about all the prophets. When you read the commentaries about Surat Al-Sharh, as so many other surahs, that when they talk about مَا الَّذِي أَنْقَضَ ظَهْرُ الرَّسُولِ, what is it that burdened the Prophet to the point of constituting such a heavy burden? And it caught my attention again that consistently when the commentators describe the mission of the prophets, including the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it's described always in the following. I'll say it in Arabic first. ينقض أركان الفراعنة والجبابرة والأكاسرة والقياسرة. That the role of prophets and the role of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is to challenge and upturn the pharaohs, the oppressors and autocrats, the Caesars. What does that mean? It means the consistent theme of what the prophets do, from Moses to Jesus to Muhammad to Joseph, is to challenge power holders. Because those who hold power are the ones who commit injustice. The role of a man or woman of God is to challenge oppression. You want to know where you stand as a man or woman of God? It's on the other side of power. The idea, the prophets could handle power. Moses could hold power and be just. Muhammad could hold power and be just. As a human being, I can't hold power and trust myself to be just. I don't want power. But I want to challenge power. If you're a man and woman of God, you want to stay clean, see where power is, and stand on the side of the oppressed. If you live in a utopia where there are no oppressed, alhamdulillah, but don't delude yourself into believing you exist in a utopia when one doesn't exist. So if you're a man or a woman of God, go stand with those who suffer at the borders. These are oppressed. They have no power. You can't stand with the people in the White House or people in this government or that government and remain a man or woman of God. That is my school of thought, and I agree with that. And there are the fuqaha generally warn against fasad al-sulta, but they insist that the role of the prophets was never to come on the side of the pharaohs and say bravo. It was always to challenge the pharaohs. Give me one prophet that stood with the pharaohs. I mean, I don't mean pharaohs meaning just Egypt. I mean all autocrats, all despots. We must be very alert to this, especially in the age of globalization and the age of money, where if you are a man or woman of religion, you can make a lot of money. I grew up with people who are now wealthier than I, or they make the salary of a law professor look like pocket change. And they're wealthy because of their religiosity. Because we live in an age where there is a lot of money to be made if your religion can be used to legitimate power. Actually, one of the craziest things I do late at night, if I'm done with dua and I'm done with my books and I'm done with salah and I'm done with Quran, I mean, you're never done, but if I turn on the missionary channels, listen to TV evangelicals. I love to listen to TV evangelicals. And their wealth it always makes me just sit there and I just think about how much money you can make off religion. You want to really see that embodied? Watch the late night TV evangelicals. Their theatrical performance costs money. It's the type of money here in the Usuli Institute, we wouldn't even be able to hold 10 minutes of their performance. I'm not telling you to watch TV in general. I like it, but I've been doing it, by the way, for 20 years. I think I can give an evangelical sermon from how much TV I've watched. I've watched Jimmy Swaggart. I've watched his son. I've watched Jimmy Swaggart grow old. I've watched his son come to age. And, I've watched so many. I used to watch Tammy, whatever her name is, until they became. And they also changed. Now the hottest thing in TV evangelicals are TV evangelicals who sort of look like they're Indian like they have the wisdom of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, yogaism, you know, so they seem like they have Christ and yoga all in one, and they're really hot, and they make a lot of money, and
They distant Islam.
huh?
And they distant Islam from both.
Oh no, these are evangelical Christians. They if they mention Islam, they always trash
They
it.
always do.
They always talk about they call the prophet a demon, and you know.
Yeah.
There's actually one of them just came out with a book that Ahmad. He's an evangelical type. The book about it says that the most evil human being that ever existed in the world is the Prophet Muhammad.
Oh.
Okay. The last lesson from Surah Al-Sharh. And would you have thought that Surah Al-Sharh, which we probably grew up with, would take? Our tradition is so rich. I mean, all of that, and I'm just giving you, like, picking little things, little tastes of fruit. So here's the last thing. I'll read it in Arabic. And this is from Ibn Juzay. Ibn Juzay, when he talks about Surah Al-Sharh, says about what he learns from it. It says, خذ من عمل آخر. خذ من عمل آخر, meaning عمل آخر. واتعب فيه فإنك تجد لذة الراحة عقب النصب بما تجنيه من ثمرة العمل. So what he's saying is, what Surah Al-Sharh teaches you is, which is really fascinating compared to the literals, is, and notice here he uses the word nasab, and because he's commenting yeah. فإذا فرغت فارغب إلى ربك فانصب. Each task will involve a challenge and hardship. But the challenge and hardship will also involve pleasure and accomplishment, and the happiness of accomplishment. But the pleasure of accomplishment, let it not make you forget the importance of looking forward to the next task of hard work and hardship. So what I find fascinating is that, like, Ibn Juzay, like so many, took from Surah Al-Sharh, not as so many modern Muslims do, you know, we do dua, Allah, remove our hardship, okay, it's done, and then we thank you. But rather that cyclical relationship of, in fact, what it challenges, what it teaches the Prophet ﷺ, and what taught Muslims at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, is with every time you have an accomplishment, look forward to the next challenge and the next hard work that you're going to do. And every time you take on the next challenge and you succeed and you feel the sense of accomplishment, don't let the arrogance and acquiescence of, well, I've achieved it, okay, fine, I'm done. No, what it in fact it invites you to do is to be in this constant dynamic relationship, and which Ibn Arabi says the nature of khalq, that's the nature that Allah teaches you from reflecting upon the laws of nature itself, that Allah basically says being dormant is a sin. So making a lot of money in the stock market and saying, okay, I'm done, now I live the rest of my life in luxury is pleasure, it's a sin. If you follow Ibn Arabi and Ibn Juzay. And in fact, even the Prophet ﷺ was never allowed. So one of the latifa min al-lata'if, as they call it, that the Prophet ﷺ at no point in his life did his worship, the amount of worship he does, the amount of dua, when you look at from the time he was in Mecca to the time in Medina till the very end of his life, it, if anything, it intensifies. He is reported in so many reports, including his wives, his companions, that he would worship for so long that his feet would crack, that he would, from, you know, and you've seen it when people stand on their feet for so long that it dries and crack. And back then you didn't have Nivea, and so although Nivea sometimes doesn't help us, it hasn't been helping me recently.
And salt?
Huh?
Salt.
Oh, I don't know. Going back to that, there was no point at which the Prophet ﷺ eased his supplications or eased his dua or lessened his worship. If your relationship with Allah, and this is a real challenge, if your relationship with Allah can reach the point where you are praying with the same intensity and the same amount, whether your material affairs are good or bad, then you're in good shape. Because most of us, our worship goes up and down in relationship often to the physical and material challenges that confront us, which is normal. I mean, it's not a sin. It's normal. It's human. But if your aspiration is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then it is finding the pleasure, the happiness, and again, it's a goal. It's like Arrogance fillah. The time that you spend with Allah, it becomes a time of pleasure, not a time of burden and exertion. I think that's enough. And we're done with Surat Al-Sharh. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. We got all the verses, right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
What?
No,
What did you say?
we got all the verses, right?
Oh yeah, I got everything, right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Is it Maghrib yet?
No.
Soon. What time is it? I think this is the first time we finished before Maghrib.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Maghrib's later now.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry.
What I said? You know what? I did forget. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Inna ma'al usri yusra.
Yes.
Why does it repeat it?
Yeah.
And one of the qira'at Ibn Mas'ud is, by the way, it's tajdeed without repetition, which is not the way most of the. But anyway, the correct one, I believe, is the ta'keed. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Actually, I'm happy you asked that question. I might have even written it down. الأولى على الحال والثانية للاستقبال. So we know in Arabic that if you repeat something like إن مع العسر يسرا twice, that's للتأكيد, to confirm or emphasize. So for instance, when the Quran says hayhat hayhat, again it's an expression, the repetition is confirmation. But beyond that, the form of ta'keed or confirmation, they say that al-ula lil-hal wal-thaniya lil-istiqbal, meaning that the first time when you say inna ma'al usri yusra was hardship there at ease. So you're affirming it, it's as if you're saying, right now, understand that with all the hardship that you're going through, ease and Allah's barakah is mixed in. هذا على الحال والثاني على الاستقبال, and when you repeat it again, you're saying, and it will also be the case in the future. So it is and it will be, which according to grammarians, that is in itself نوع من التأكيد. So for instance, the Basriyin says, the people from Basra, that when you say something al-hal or something for al-istiqbal, something for now and affirm it as also in the future, that is the definition of ta'keed. That's the definition of underscoring something. But I mean, beyond the fine points of grammar, that it is that form of repetition on hal wa al istiqbal, that it is now and it will always be in the future. It was also a form known in Arabic poetry, so it is not something that surprised Arabs, and even among the very early and rudimentary commentaries, because the very early commentaries were mostly oral transmissions, and they would write only headlines, which a lot of Orientalists, by the way, miss, because it's not that what's written is everything they have to say. The style for the first few centuries of Islam was that you only write the headlines and you rely on the commentary of the teacher for the elaboration. And of course, then as time went by, it became necessary to write the commentaries itself because of the complexity of life itself and the movement of students and so on and so forth. That's the main thing to say about the why it repeats. There is a hadith munqata, meaning that it's been reported to one as something that a companion said, but or there's a missing link in the transmission. It's been reported as something that Ibn Mas'ud said, and also reported something rufi'a an al-Rasul, that's something that was then attributed to the Prophet, that says that there is never a hardship without a double ease. I'm not forgetting the beginning of the hadith, but the reason I didn't mention it is that it's of doubtful authenticity. The other thing I skipped in was that when they always talk about the surah, and I'll tell you why I skipped it since we finished before Maghrib, is when they come to فَشَرَحَ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ, شَرَحَ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ, they always talk about حادثة شق صدر الرسول.
Yeah.
They always talk about when it says we expanded your chest. Is it referring to spiritual thing or intellectual thing, or whatever you want to call metaphysical thing, or is it also referring to an event in which the Prophet's chest is supposed to have been split by angels, a black cloth taken out? And let me put you all in the picture if you already know the story. The story goes that at the time that the Prophet ﷺ was, this is before he was a prophet, at the time he was a child, at the time his mother took him to Halima al-Murda'a and left him with Halima. Arabs used to take their children to the desert and have them spend their formative years in the desert, because the desert teaches you a lot of things. One of the things is better for your health, but it also toughens you up. It teaches you a relationship with nature. So it was a practice among Urbanites, those who lived in the city, in the metropolis in Mecca, to take their children and have them spend a few years in the desert with Bedouins. And then after spending a few years and by the way, this practice continued even at the time when I was a young child in Kuwait. It was still done, but at a smaller. So instead of taking your children, have them spend a couple of years in the desert, they would take their children and have them spend 6 months in the desert or summer in the desert and so on. I don't know if it still exists, but as I was growing up over the years, I've noticed that it was disappearing from Kuwait more and more. you know, you want to stay in the air conditioning. You don't want to. Who wants to go to the desert? There's all the dust and so on. Although I love the desert. I love the desert. I wish we could live in a shack in the desert, but Grace would complain because there's no pharmacy there. And I say, well, okay, so what happens when it's time to fill your pills? Meaning, because I have to worry about your pills. You can go around dreaming about your desert, but I have to worry about going to the pharmacy and getting your pills, and giving you your pills, and making sure you don't forget your pills. And so, anyway. So,
There's more to the story than that.
yeah, substantially
But we didn't
more.
have this in Egypt, did we? I never heard of it.
No, I don't
I would
think.
have
No, Egypt has become urbanized. Although it did exist or does exist in the Bedouins of Sina until the Egyptian army destroyed the Bedouins of Sina.
Well, how about child psychologists that say the first 2 years very important to spend with the parents?
Well, it's very interesting because I mean they would stay with their parents until the age 3 or 4. Which, I mean, I will never criticize the practice of traditional societies, because what anthropology has taught me is traditional societies have an enormous amount of wisdom, and that modernity destroyed so much wisdom. And I learned it actually by reading about American Indian tribes, not even Bedouin tribes. And when I see how much American Indian tribes have lost, and some of the remarkable knowledge they have, it just blows my mind. And it saddens me that we colonize them, that white people colonize them, not I. I'm not white. White people colonized them and brutalized them, as they did with so many native cultures. So anyway, to go back to this story that, the children are playing at the time that the Prophet ﷺ was with Halima, the Murdi'a, the wet nurse, and Halima, as the reports go, that at the time she loved the Prophet. She said that when he came to her household, all types of blessings came with him, and that she just thought that he was a beautiful child full of light and full of beauty. And the children come running to her, screaming, "We think Muhammad has been killed, we think Muhammad is killed, what's wrong, what's wrong?" They say there were 2 men that appeared, they were wearing white, and they grab Muhammad, and we think they killed him. So Halima, of course, and her husband, they run to where it was, and they find him fine. And as the reports go, that they split his chest. That's hadith al-Shaqq al-Sadr al-Rasul. And some reports say they washed his heart in ice. Some reports say they washed his heart in a golden plate with water. Some reports say that they removed a black clot. The idea was that they immunized them from evil and demons. Now, as the report goes, that she realizes after this incident that this is not a normal child. This is a child that is supernatural, a special mission. So when Halima comes to pick up the Prophet ﷺ, to take him back with her, she begs her to leave him, and she tells her, listen, in Mecca there's a plague, which was true. There was a plague in Mecca at the time. Why expose him to the plague? Leave him with us. And Halima wants the presence of the Prophet with his children is elevating their manners and bringing a lot of barakah and blessings, and the animals love him, and the birds love him, and so she begs his mother to let him stay. So his mother finally concedes and agrees, and goes back to Mecca, and she agrees, according to these reports, because she was worried about the plague, and the plague was killing a lot of children. And then the incident happens again. This time, Halima and her husband say, okay, it happening once was one thing, but it happening twice. Now we're getting worried. So they take him and go to his mother in Mecca and say, please take him back. And the Prophet's mother said, well, you were really insistent that he stay with you. What happened? She keeps insisting. They give her some excuses. Then she keeps insisting on knowing what happened. And finally they tell her that angels appeared. This time Halima says that she saw the incident, and they split his chest and so on. And the Prophet's mother at this point says, well, thank you for bringing him back, but I know that this means he is a blessed child. Some reports say that the splitting of the chest happened no less than 5 times at different times in the Prophet's lives. Now, having said all of that, and I know that this is controversial, I am not among those Muslims who believes in Hadithat Shaq Sadr Rasul. I am not among those Muslims who believe that it is true that angels appeared and split the Prophet's chest and either washed his heart or removed the black clot or any of that. Interestingly, I had decided to skip this among them. In every tafsir, I skip a whole bunch of stuff. If you open my brain and enter that, you will find it a forest of confusion. Just a lot of bungled things, but just in case I got a question that would raise this, so I brought with me. This is Tafsir al-Razi, so it's not even a rare source or anything. So, I'll read the Arabic first, and then القاضي ابن عبد الجبار طعن في هذه الرواية من وجوه. أحدها أن الرواية أن هذه الواقعة إنما وقعت في حال صغره عليه السلام، وذلك من المعجزات، فلا يجوز أن تتقدم نبوته. وثانيها أن تأثير الغسل في إزالة الأجسام والمعاصي ليست بأجسام، فلا يكون للغسل فيها أثر. وثالثهما and he goes on. So there was a point when, and again, I know that this is a controversial position, there was a point where Muslims used reason. And Qadi Abdul Jabbar was among those who said, listen, this story cannot be accepted, regardless of the chains of transmission. Why? One, I mean, I didn't read the part, but one, that he mentions at number 3, I mentioned at number 1. No, one is that if we don't accept the idea that you need to crucify Jesus to forgive people's sins, God doesn't need to make his son suffer, or whatever form of son it was, whether real or not, etc. God can just forgive sins. This whole notion of God must make someone suffer, his son suffer, so that people will be absolved of sins is absurd in Islamic theology. So why would God need to send angels to wash the Prophet's chest or heart? God just says, be, and it will be. Be pure, and it will be pure. Second is that he says that washing a heart has to do with physiology and medical issues. Washing a heart or a chest doesn't clean sins, doesn't do anything for sins. Whether you wash it with water, or whether you wash it with ice, or you wash it with gold plate, or so. Among those who followed Qadi Abdul Jabbar said, if this story is to be accepted at all, it would be accepted as symbolic corruption. In other words, it was a metaphorical narrative that wanted to, and Arabs would often, like 1001 Nights, if you've read it, you tell stories, you teach ethics, you teach morality by exaggerating, by symbolism. So you talk about the rabbit that speaks and the bulbul, what's a bulbul? Huh?
Cannery?
A canary? Yeah. A canary that does adhan and a rug that flies and of course you're trying to convey a very moral lessons in all of that, or kalila udamna and so on, and they said that over time people attributed it to the Prophet ﷺ as a hadith. That it started out as a riwayah by the Qussas, and then it was attributed. Some insist that it is also like the satanic verses. That, yes, the satanic verses are narrated by all these chains, but it fundamentally cannot be accepted. There is a huge theological problem if you accept the satanic verses as authentic at any level or any degree. I am among those who do not accept in any way or form that the Prophet's chest was split or resewn, because in some of the narratives say, Halima reported that Halima says, we looked at his chest and we could see the remnants of sewing, because back then they would actually resew, and they would sew with threads made out of the intestine of animals, so that they would, I don't know I don't know how they would purify it or whatever. I know literature, I don't know medicine. Anyway, now a lot of Muslims, especially Salafis and Wahhabis, and even a lot of Sufis, will be scandalized by me saying that. You're free to believe whatever you want. It troubles me for a variety of theological reasons, and there are numerous problems that I can spend hours talking about all the problems with the chains of transmission, and that it is a report that Halima didn't even live. Most of those who say the story didn't meet Halima and didn't hear it from Halima. So that begs the question. Well, they say, they report that the Prophet said that Halima said. But that makes no sense for a variety of reasons. And then also, it's just, when you get to the world of mythology and imagination, it is clear in my humble opinion, and you don't have to accept it, but in my humble opinion, it is clear that what happens with history happened with a lot of the seerah of the Prophet. People start telling stories in the typical way they did in the medieval world. The borders between reality and mythology is a very modern thing. The very idea of realism and pragmatism, it's a modern invention. It's thoroughly modern invention. And I don't know if it's a good invention. Maybe the world of mythology and magic was much better. But with the passage of time, there is clearly a lot of the mythology was imported into history and reported as history. And this doesn't just happen with Islam, it happened with all the religious traditions. You read the Kabbalah or the Torah, and you read fantastical things that were impossible. It's just not humanly possible that any of that happened. But if you are a rational commentator, a rational rabbinic commentator, you understand it as conveying moral lessons, and you decipher it as metaphors to teach a moral lesson. If you can't extract a moral lesson from it, then you say that's mythology, and I put it aside. Allahu A'lam. But Al-Razi, by the way, refutes, doesn't accept what Qadi Abdul Jabbar says. So in other words, he disagrees with him, but that's not surprising because Razi often criticizes what Khaled Abou El Fadl says. But I just refound it in Razi, so that's why I brought it Razi.
Dr. Abou El Fadl, do you use Ibn Kathir tafsir as well, or do
Ibn
you-
Kathir is he represents a very literal school. He's very good to know the basic meaning. If you want to get a sense of the layers, I always think like Tafsir Mataridi is very good. And we're very lucky that it survived, because a lot of the things by the Maturidiyya didn't survive. But even like a Tafsir al-Mawardi, who gives you, Mawardi I really like because he says, and he reports on all the different schools of thought, or all the different debates. So he says, the first debate, 1, second debate, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the only thing about Mawardi is he doesn't elaborate. So then you have to do a lot of research to discover, okay, he gives you 5 different debates. What were these debates about other than the little 1 or 2 sentences that Mawardi tells you? Then you have to do research, and but I mean, if I
who do you use mostly?
I mean, who would I recommend? Because
Yes.
who I live
That are
with us now.
available in English. I know there's Sayyid Qutb in English and Ibn Kathir in English.
In English, I absolutely would recommend 2 tafsirs and translations, and I don't go beyond them. The study Quran, what is it called? The study Quran, the one that's at Sinnas?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I like the translation and I like the footnotes. The footnotes sum up all the major debates in a very succinct and clean fashion, and they were honest enough to include citations. So they give you citations to where you could, if you wanted to research more. I think all the criticism of the study Quran is really unfair, and I think it was a great effort. I wasn't involved in it at all, but objectively and fairly, it was a great effort, and a very good translation was a very good commentator. The second one that I would recommend, not just as a translation but also as a commentary, is Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, probably one of the most undervalued scholars that ever lived in our modern world. He converted, was Jewish, converted to Islam. His conversion came out of deep, deep study. I mean, this man knew the Torah and the New Testament inside out. And his commentary clearly comes from a heavy engagement and a dialectical, dynamic engagement with Tabari. And in light of what the entire tradition of Christianity and Judaism says, he's a great source, and his tafsir was treated so unfairly that it's hard to find, it's expensive when you find it. But these 2 sources.
I got it at the Islamic Center.
Hmm?
I got it from the Islamic
I
Center.
don't think they have it anymore.
$75.
Yeah, it's $75.
You can
It's
get
not
it
bad.
Amazon too. You can get it Amazon.
Still? Last time I was there.
I was just gonna ask this. Muhammad Asad has like Wahhabism influence because I know he spent time in Makkah and whatnot.
He was a product of his age. He was welcomed by Ibn Saud. He was celebrated by the Saudi government. So, but the people who actually fought his tafsir and undermined its spread was Saudi Arabia, and it was the Wahhabis. But you know, the interesting thing is, it is clear that Saudi has abandoned Wahhabism. I mean, Wahhabism has become an orphan. It is Saudi Arabia no longer funds or supports classical Wahhabism. It supports Madkhalism, Madakhiliya, which is, I mean, it's basically your God is the ruler. And so, can you sing, can you dance, can you take off your hijab? Ask the ruler. It's belly dancing halal or haram. If Sisi says it's halal, you belly dance. If MBS says it's halal, you belly dance. Is Mariah Carey haram or halal? The ruler. Is Jerusalem important or not important? Ask the ruler. Everything, ask the ruler. It's a very wonderful, beautiful Islam. Because it just ask the ruler. Everything. And khalas. And so we can all go home, and if the ruler says you don't have to pray, then we don't have to pray. Alhamdulillah.
And the Arabic tafsir, you stopped at Mawardi.
I mean, if I would recommend a tafsir for for a working Muslim, meaning Muslim who wants to get a lot of richness, but is not going to sit there and spend their life doing research in tafsir, I like Al-Razi. I think Al-Razi is very comprehensive. I would not recommend the Tabari, although a lot of people use it. Tabari it has a lot of athar, and it could lead to a lot of confusion. I like Al-Razi, and I like Al-Maturidi. If you want a functional but very useful tafsir is San'ani, not a San'ani, it's San'ani. He was a Sufi, but he was a Salafi-esque, I mean, before Salaf. It was a Sufi with Ahl al-Hadith type inclination. So his tafsir is very straightforward, but it's very helpful. It's I know I'm going to remember other tafsir and then there's one called Tafsir al-Lubab, which is very good, but I can't remember who wrote Tafsir al-Lubab. Any of you computer people, if you know how to type Arabic, Tafsir al-Lubab. It's very good, and I use it often, but I can't remember the name of the author, and I don't know, it will come to me, inshallah.
For the English, there's a recent translation.
Ibn Adi?
Ibn Adi, that's it. Yes. I like that. I like it a lot. If you can find it will give you a very good survey of all the major debates. And he doesn't take sides, which is interesting. I mean, he doesn't also get you lost in grammar, because a lot of people, when they read tafsir, they get turned off by all the grammar, and they can't understand it. So they start with a lot of enthusiasm, and then they get turned off and they drop it. So that is another thing to keep in mind. So that's why I like that. But you were saying in English what?
Recently published. Tafsir al-Razi translated.
Tafsir al-Razi.
Not the whole thing. It's just one volume so far, so I think it covers the Fatiha.
Oh, that's going to take a while for it to come in English, right? Who's translating it? Do you know?
He's an Azhari from Scotland.
Interesting.
I'm forgetting his name now.
I mean, that would take a long time. What do you think?
I think he's already started.
And who's publishing? Publishing Fonts Vitae, or
I can't
sort of
remember.
expensive.
But he just finished his PhD at SOAS with
that would be, I mean, if it's in English, that would be really a good source. Because, I mean, Tafsir al-Razi is an excellent source. I mean, he has its own pet peeves. He doesn't like the Mu'tazila and he dumps on them whenever he can, but although he's a rationalist, but, you know, Fakhruddin al-Razi, anyway, that's a different story. But that's, I'm trying, you know, if Abdul Halim, the guy at SOAS, if he would have, his translation of the Quran is just strict. He doesn't like have commentary. Otherwise, he could have been a very interesting source. But he really doesn't have any much commentary at all. Yeah, I mean, English, it's the study of the Quran and Muhammad Asad. For English speakers.
Would you recommend Yusuf Ali too? Would you?
Dated, and not if you want. No, because Yusuf Ali, I mean, dated, and also he doesn't have footnotes that give you any sense of the nuance of the choices he made. Because he makes choices among. So, for instance, like Surah Al-Sharh, you know, when you say "Inna ma'al usri yusra" and then you say after hardship there will be ease. If you don't give people a sense that you're making a choice, that it's a promise of first you suffer hardship and then you get ease, it is problematic because it flattens the Quran. And yeah, I mean.
The study Quran is only in English, right? It's only with the translation.
And I know that Said Hussein Nasr was involved in it, but I don't remember who else. I know Hamza Yusuf took part, but Joe Lombard, yeah.
Maria.
Yeah,
Maria.
Maria.
That's two.
Muhammad Rustam. It's like right here.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah, he has it. That one.
Take a picture. I'll take a picture.
Do you, how much is Muhammad Asad on Amazon?
75.
Well, I mean,
The last time I checked, I haven't checked in a long time.
well, I got a PDF for free online and I read it. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
You got a free.
Send us the link. Post it on the Usuli Facebook.
Yeah, I can post it.
Be
Really?
awesome.
Yeah,
So you
it
want-
has not typos, but
If you want to buy used one, it's like $26. Of
This is
Muhammad Asad.
the pizza.
I would buy that.
Muhammad Asad's been
Why
edited.
don't you like Muhammad Asad?
I like it.
Yeah, it's really.
It's my favorite translation.
Oh, the edited version, Dr. Abou El Fadl, because it's been edited
Oh,
2-3 times, Muhammad Asad, and the last one includes a transliteration.
Oh, really?
There's a transliteration.
I've actually read only the first edition, the one that had typos.
okay.
But that is not. I mean, but I mean, I hope that he didn't take out anything from the commentaries
Right.
to shorten it, because I know that the publisher was complaining that it's too big and he wanted it shorter. He wanted to make it a smaller size.
I don't think so. Now they have it in volumes, in I think
Yeah.
5 volumes, so they
5
couldn't have
volumes.
taken things out.
Oh, I haven't even seen that.
No?
Nice.
I'll bring it next time.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. The
Bigger
world
than, the
of
study of
electronics, I mean, I have friends that whatever book I mention to them, somehow, you can always get it from the net. And
Always.
to me, it's like, you know, we're like watching a magician doing things out of thin air. I'm just stunned. I mean, every time I try to do anything on the computer, I end up with viruses on my laptop. And then Grace has to come and do that thing where install a program that cleans the viruses. And now I'm so scared of viruses that
Get a
I
Mac.
don't do anything with my computer that involves the net.
Get a Mac.
I have a Mac. It's a Mac.
Get viruses.
Ask her. She always says, why is it they always end up with viruses? What sites you go to? I say, well, I don't go to any sites other than try to download books. What disgusting sites do you end up at? It's all, I'm trying, it says to download this book, hit this download button, download this program. Isn't that?
No, but
Don't download the program.
Yeah.
Never download the program.
Those websites are tricky, where you can download books and movies and stuff.
I don't care about the movies, I just care about the books. But it
Right.
always says to download the book, you have to download this program.
Skip the
No?
program part.
So,
Then you can't
take
ever
it at
download
face
the book.
value.
You can't
Take what they say at face value.
I'm talking about the viruses that
Yeah.
end up in my PC.
Yeah, you can't do that.
See?
We should break to pray Maghrib.
Okay, let's-
So yeah, and the pizza's here too, so maybe after
Why
Maghrib.
don't you,
Do we still have
Is there a Q&A?
I can write down the name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but if you,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll do a little,
Okay.
how do you
This
have
one,
energy
you-
for some Q&A?
Okay.
Like after prayer and after people maybe get some pizza, we can do a little short Q&A.
Me too.